Hello, assalamu alaikum everybody. Hope you're all safe, sound, and healthy. And I have done at least 100 podcasts because I remember when I actually started my podcast, and later on, even when I was invited by other podcast domains, saying that they would like to use my podcast for their awareness, education, and teaching materials. It was mainly these relevant topics or related topics that I kept on and on yapping about. So I'm sure I've done at least 100 podcasts, and that is on parenting, family, relatives, duties, rights, and all that is wrong with society at large, and why our society is so demented and regressed, and why we're facing the problems, psychological especially problems that we're facing. But it seems that even 100 episodes are not enough. So it seems, because weirdly enough, people are coming up and saying the same things over and over again. So remember, if you want the world to change, you need to learn to look within yourself first. You need to learn to self assess, to self reflect, and then to implement whatever it is that you've learned from your self assessment. But as it is, people do not want to self assess or self reflect. No, even within that, they're always about bias confirmation. And that is what is wrong with the world today. Everybody's looking out for everybody's basically looking out to get a bias confirmation. They're not looking out to refute themselves. They're not looking out to genuinely, objectively see if they're wrong or right. And even if they do realize they're wrong, they do not care. Yeah, no, they do not care. And that is essentially why we have, again, psychological problems. I've said it time and again. The reason why we are breeding a more sociopathic society, a more narcissistic society, a more self absorbed society, a more isolated society, is because we have had generations of the same mistakes being committed over and over again. Where as children, we realize that these are mistakes that parents make. But when we go on to become parents, we start justifying the same mistakes because we end up doing the same things ourselves, and then we realize, oh, you know what, they were actually right, even though they were wrong. And why are they wrong? Well, first and foremost, if you have felt something on the receiving end to be wrong, then it is wrong. And when you realize that you're becoming the very people who have wronged you, then it means you haven't learned to break the chain. And I think this is also essentially why I applaud those people who refuse to get into matrimony and who refuse to get into childbirth. I think they're more responsible than those who want to get married for the sake of marriage and who want to have children for the sake of having children. Yes. And this again refutes the essence of family. This is, in fact, probably the core reason behind why we have reached the stage where the Prophet, peace be upon him, said that a time will come when khoon safed ho jayenge, right? So it means that blood relatives, blood will turn to white, literally speaking. In other words, it means that your blood relatives will no longer have that important connection that is required within a family in order for a family to exist in harmony. It means that brothers will go against brothers, parents will go against children. It means that the sense of family will have finished, in other words. Blood ties will hold no importance anymore. People will backstab their own blood. That is what it means when we say it. When he said, blood will turn white. Okay? So let's try to understand this. Why is blood turning white? Why are relatives no longer relativing, so to speak? It is because people are doing things for the sake of fitting in for the sake of blending in, for the sake of showing the world that there's nothing wrong with them. They're not doing things for the reasons that things should be done. They're not getting married because they actually want to live with the person in front of them for the rest of their lives. They are not getting, they're not falling in love because they have true emotional connection with another person. No, they're falling in love because they love the idea of being in love. They're getting married because they love the idea of getting married, or they just have to prove to the world that they're normal like everybody else. And it's the world's fault as well. Again, first and foremost, our own parents who keep on pressurizing us to get married. As God Himself says, there's a time for everything. And to force somebody to stop his life, to stop whatever he's doing, just so that he can cede to your wishes, so that you can show off to the world that you as parents have not failed. And so you need to force your children to get married, just to prove yourselves normal and to prove yourselves that you've succeeded at parenting. This is one of the biggest issues that parents have. And they have had it for at least the past 5 generations, which is very bad, very bad. And that is why each generation that we create is worse off than the last. They are psychologically unable to be normal, even if they want to. I'm sorry, but that's a fact. And I know the azan is going on in the background, and I really, really want to stop the podcast, but the problem is that I tend to forget the most important words the minute I pick up the mic. And right now, while I'm still fresh at it, my apologies that I have to keep on yapping despite the fact that the azan is going on. But you know what? Since I've already forgotten what it is that I was saying, and I have made one of my major points, let's hit pause. Okay, right, back. So, now here is my biggest problem. My biggest problem is that, as I said, people keep on doing the same shit over and over again, and they're learning nothing out of it. Okay? Now, for example, I'm hearing the same arguments from people. That just shows how self-absorbed, narcissistic, self-centered, and psychologically demented they are. Whose choice was it to get married? Certainly it wasn't mine for you to get married, right? Who made the choice to get married? You did. You decided to get married. For whatever freaking reason it was, whatever demented psychological reason it was, but the fact is you wanted to get married. You got married. Okay. Next step. Who asked you to give birth to kids? Why did you give birth to kids? Again, at that point, I'm sure, because I was one of those, I'm sure that there must have been people who would have told you, hold on a bit. Don't give birth right now. Think about it first, right? But no, you, like everybody else, decided that no, we should give birth to kids because right now we're young and we're married, and any marital problems that are occurring at this point, when you give birth to a child, then both parents will suddenly focus. They will have one thing in common. It will be an important thing in common, and so they will become together again. Yeah, that is the worst. The worst. And I don't know why, again, this has been an idea that has been transfixed into everybody's minds for centuries. Yeah, you hear your grandparents, your great grandparents, your great great grandparents, your great 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 grandparents, your great 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 freaking grandparents, ancestors go centuries back, and they all seem to have conceived this idea from out of nowhere that, oh, having marital problems, give birth, and everything will. What on earth do you even mean by that? If anything, you have just created a new problem, because now you're stuck. Actually, it would have been better off if you gave time, did not give birth, and understood where you actually stood with each other, so that if you feel this is going nowhere, you can get away from this without disturbing another life. But when you bring children into the mix, you're disturbing other lives in your process. Okay? So now you think that because of your kids, you have to just get together, get together. We know that nowadays, our generation, the generation before us, was probably the last, the generation before us was probably the last one that decided to just, for the children's sake, keep their marriage together and fight like dogs every day till their deaths. That did not do wonders, let me tell you. If anything, that proved that it is even more toxic to decide to compromise and live together for the sake of your children when you're not getting along anymore. Because what happens is that now your children are facing a very unharmonious environment. They're living day in and day out with constant stress and tension because they don't know when the frack it is that you're going to suddenly start yelling and fighting like dogs and cats with each other. They don't know. They don't know. Every time they think, oh, finally there's peace today, suddenly you will start yelling at the top of your lungs and fighting and screeching and screaming at each other. So you haven't given a good life to your children. You're struggling in many ways, and because of you, your children are unnecessarily struggling in many ways. And psychological struggle is the worst because it lasts a lifetime. So you are scarred. You weren't ready to be parents. You actually did not deserve to be parents, and you were definitely not qualified to be parents. But you became parents, and as a result, you have ruined lives. And now those children, which is now our generation, we have become the worst parents again, because all those promises we made to ourselves that we will not be like our parents, they go out the window the minute we find ourselves mirroring them. Because that is exactly what happens when you are living in the same environment and then your whole society more or less produces that same environment. So it doesn't matter, even if you want to break that cycle, you will not break that cycle because the whole society is in that cycle. And so you find yourself doing the same thing. You're getting married, but you're not happy now in your marriage. And now you're thinking, oh, okay, let's give birth to kids. Are you serious? And when there is somebody like me telling you, hold on, just hold on, and you think that I'm your enemy, and you don't hold on, and you decide to start popping out children, and then you decide, oh, I cannot live any longer like this. Oh, my life is hell. And then what happens? You break up your wedding vows, I guess, if you're a non-Muslim, or you break up your marriage. You get a divorce if you're a Muslim. No vows here, but okay. You leave. And then now here comes another problem. This is again another thing I've said again and again. Parents do not care about their children. Because, hello, if they really cared, first of all, they wouldn't be going where they're going in the first place. Their egos would take a back seat. Yeah, you see, that is the idea that the old generation had when they said, oh, you have problems in marriage, give birth. They thought, you have problems in marriage, you have egos. When you will have kids, your egos will take a back seat because you will have something more important to focus on. But unfortunately, as I said, each generation is worse psychologically, worse equipped than the last. And so you've got now our generation, which is very, very ill-equipped, because this generation hasn't seen peace in any form. And now you think that you're going to do better. Good luck to you. You cannot do better again if you do not work on yourself first. If you think that just jumping into marriage and then having kids and basically doing the very same things that all the previous generations did before you, committing the same mistakes and learning nothing out of it, how is that going to make you break the cycle? You just revived the whole cycle. You learned nothing. You implemented nothing. And now, to put a cherry on top, you went one step further and decided to have kids and then break your wedding, break your marriage, decide to go your separate ways, which you could have very safely done if you hadn't given birth to any children at all, then nobody would have cared if you divorced 10 times, because it's literally just you and the other person involved. But when you have children in the mix, then it's not you and the other person involved. It's now children, new lives, new potential lives that are now going to be ruined, again, psychologically, which is the worst kind of ruination you can give another human being, because that lasts, again, what did I say? A lifetime. And then, as I said, because egos, it's all about egos, and your egos didn't take a back seat. So now, the truth is, none of you care about your children, but now you're both fighting for custody over your children. Why? Because you both believe they're your property. Your children are not human beings to you, they are your properties. And that is what makes it even worse again. Again, because in Islam, your children are not your properties. Your children are God's properties that He has held in amanat with you. And you have failed God and failed His properties. You have failed another human being. And then again, take one step further. Now the father doesn't want to pay anything. He wants custody of his kids, but he doesn't want to pay anything. The mother wants control over the kids. And why is it that they both want control over the kids again? Control. Yes, that's the key word here. They want to own them. They want to mold them to the way they want them to be. They want to dominate them. They want to turn them, use them against the other. That is the core reason here behind this whole dogfight over children. And obviously the mother takes the kids. Usually 9 times out of 10, the mother takes the kids. Again, now here comes another question. When even in Islam, it is not the mother's responsibility, it is the father's responsibility. Why, first of all, are you fighting with him over custody? Number one, because of your ego, because you want to own your kids, okay. But then you don't want to take responsibility, neither the father nor the mother. Nobody wants to take the responsibility. It falls on the parents of whoever takes custody. Not just the parents, the whole family of whichever spouse has custody. That whole family, their lives now get ruined. Why? Because now they have a problem where they have to put their lives on hold to help take charge of these new lives who, as I said, are potentially damaged psychologically already thanks to the whole trauma. Okay. And now, if you are lucky enough to have a mature single parent, then everybody put together, as they say, it takes a village to help to bring up a child. That's fine. That village can work together smoothly if and only if you have the parent, whoever it is who has custody, who has at least this much maturity, that they keep their problems to themselves. But if you have, again, these kind of demented, selfish, narcissistic, self-centered, spoilt brats for a parent, and that parent has taken custody of you, what is that person going to be doing? He's constantly going to be throwing everything on his family. He's constantly going to be throwing tantrums. He's never going to be there for the kids, but he's always going to be fighting with even his own family and throwing all his... Okay, so is it your family's fault that you decided to get married and then you decided to have kids and then you decided to have a divorce? If anything, your family should have kicked you out, refused to take you in, and tell you that you're on your own. Because, because such people, when they talk to you, they say, especially if they're females, after 20 years or 15 years or 10 years of using and usurping their whole family into taking care of their kids, They say, oh, technically, religiously, morally, it's not even my duty to take care of these kids. Yeah. Didn't you know that when everybody was telling you leave the kids with the husband? That time you wanted them. That time you wanted to hold on to them because they were your property. Because even then, you knew you weren't going to take care of them. You knew that you were going to throw them on your parents and on your siblings and on your family while you did whatever the shit it is that you wanted to live your life. Because you basically just wanted control of your kids because they were your property. And now, when it's time, when literally they have been brought up by your family, and all you have to do is to now just be there for them, even that is so difficult for you, that now you remember that religiously and morally and technically and literally it's not your duty. Again, when you were filing a divorce and maniacally fighting for custody, your parents, your siblings, your cousins, your aunts, your uncles, your grandparents all told you that your kids are not your responsibility. Let them live with their father. But that time you were just dying to own them. And this is where the problem arises with both mothers and fathers. Yes, there are cases where mothers, they want to keep their kids because they feel that only they can love their kids and only they. But no, I'm sorry, nowadays that's not the case. Nowadays, in 9 out of 10 divorce cases, you have the custody issue based on ego, and then within that 50%, neither the mother nor the father are actually interested in bringing up their children. Again, it's just ego. It's just control. It's just ownership. It's just one-upping the other, It's basically that. It's basically one showing the other that, I win, I've got this. You can't do anything now. It's really just that, which is despicable, to say the least. And now, here comes the other point. If in Islam, technically, morally, and ethically, and literally, it's not the mother's duty to take care of her kids, in Islam, there is also another clause that says that if you have chosen to take the kids away from their father, once you have filed divorce, then they become ethically, morally, religiously, and literally your duty. Not your parents' duty, not your siblings' duty, whose life you just ruined because you just decided that your sibling has no right to live their own lives. You decided to call them back from abroad. You decided to ruin their career, ruin their studies, ruin everything so that they should come and take care of your children. Again, excuse me, where is it written that it is technically, morally, and ethically your siblings' duty to take care of your children that you gave birth to? Where? Where is it written? And where is it written that it is your parents' duty? It is your duty. It is always the parent's duty. As the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, just giving birth doesn't make you a parent. And in other words, do not expect to get the status. That status that every parent thinks that they automatically get because they have now given birth. Yeah, you don't automatically get that status in Islam. You have to earn that status. You earn that status by fulfilling your duties. Otherwise, you don't get granted that status. You have no status as a parent in Islam. So, it's about choice. In Islam, everything is about choice. If you have chosen to get married, it's your responsibility. That is what Islam says. If you have chosen to have children, it's your responsibility. If you have chosen to get a divorce, it is your responsibility now. If you have chosen to take custody of your kids, whichever spouse it is, man or woman, If you have chosen to take custody of your kids after divorce, it is 100% your responsibility. However you do it is your problem now. It's nobody's problem. It is their kindness and it is their greatness if your family decides to plunge in to help you out, but it is not their duty. It is your duty, especially if you've made the choice. So, when you make a certain choice in life, it means you have decided to take responsibility. You cannot say then that, oh, technically, morally, religiously, this is not my duty, because it is. Because technically, morally, religiously, ethically, when you make the decision and the choice to do something, then it becomes your responsibility. It is as simple as that. And this is why we always say that it's very important to make informed choices, informed decisions. And this is why I have a huge problem with societies like ours, where that very God-given self-control, that God-given control over ourselves to make our own decisions is taken away. It's taken away by our parents, it's taken away by our society, and they try to use God's name or religion as the reason why, when the religion itself actually contradicts it. In religion, it is not even allowed. In religion, it is forbidden to make choices for another person. And in religion, it is forbidden to throw your burdens on another person. And when you go against these very laws, these very divine laws, which are actually inherently the laws of nature, then you start creating problems for yourselves as well as for others. And that is why our society, our country, our world has become this absolute cesspit of no end of psychological patients and confused people who think they can pick and choose anything that suits them and to hell with everything else. That's not how it's done. And that is why I keep on and on saying human beings are the only animals that go against nature and call it natural. So think about that, okay? It is your responsibility and your duty, morally, religiously, ethically, literally, as a mother, if you have chosen to take custody over your kids, to provide for them and to be responsible for them. And whether or not the man has custody over kids, it is still his duty, religiously, morally, ethically, and literally, to provide for them, especially religiously. But it becomes the mother's duty too, if she makes that choice to take custody of her children and to become a single parent. It is also her responsibility. And it is also her duty to make sure that her husband pays up. That is also her duty. And it is the duty of the courts, and it is the duty of the society, of the country, of the parents of that man. And when everybody starts refuting their duties, that is when your society goes haywire. And again, that is why our society is the way it is today. Think about that before you start yapping about responsibilities and duties. Make informed decisions, make informed choices, and stop forcing your decisions and choices on others. And learn to take responsibility for your own choices and decisions. It goes both ways. Both of you categories need to listen to this. This is me signing out. Khuda Hafiz.